Good morning. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Committee of Chairs. Today is June 27th, 2018. The Committee of Chairs is a special committee I have appointed, which consists of the chairs of the standing committees of the Board of Trustees. The appointment of this special committee will come before the full board for approval at our July board meeting. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. Kiss to please take a roll call of attendance. All of the trustees, if you could quickly unmute your phones as Michelle goes through the roll call.
Thank you, Spencer. Okay. Chairman Day.
Present.
Trustee Eisen.
Here.
Trustee Fagan.
Here.
Trustee Furstenberg.
Here.
Trustee Campbell. Here. Trustee Melendez.
Here.
Trustee Morales.
I'm sorry, was that Trustee Nyland?
Trustee Nyland.
Here.
Trustee Norton.
Here.
Trustee Simon. Trustee Taylor.
Here. Sorry, was on mute. I am here. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm
Trustee
here, Michelle.
Perfect.
I'm
And
here.
Chancellor White.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Kiss. As a brief reminder, the teleconference being open and is being live streamed, and there are no requests for public comment. Again, just a reminder, if my colleagues can have their phones on mute until they need to speak, just for the public's ease of hearing. What I'd like to do is to just kick off this discussion. I don't know that this meeting will need to take too long. I appreciate all of you calling in and taking the time to have this conversation. The reason I call this meeting really is twofold. One, for the first time in many years, we have a full board of trustees. So we have many more hands to contribute to the workload and to more evenly distribute that workload amongst our various committees. And second, as I was named chair, it very quickly occurred to me that there were a number of items that our colleagues had a desire to bring to the board for conversation and or action. And it became readily apparent to me that we need to have some order and structure to assist me in managing this workflow and the requests that were coming my way for items to be discussed by the full board. At the outset, I will say that my objective, first and foremost, will always be as chair to be collaborative and hopefully work very well with my colleagues and be responsive to their requests. And so I will always want to honor trustees' requests to bring something to the agenda. At the same time, I want to also acknowledge the hard work of Tim and his executive team and all of our campus leaders as they work to frame our agendas well in advance, many months in advance, and sometimes, as you can see in one of the attachments that Michelle sent to you, a year in advance. And so there are certain things that are on our agenda on a regular basis on specific months of the year for very specific reasons. And so I would like to have a conversation with all of you today to give me and Tim some guidance as to how I can best manage the requests from our colleagues to have items placed on the agenda for either information or discussion, and take into consideration this underlying workload that staff has that for various reasons we are mandated to discuss at various times throughout the year. So again, my objective is not to limit or inhibit communication or conversation in any way. It's more to enlist you to help me manage our colleagues' expectations as to how quickly we can get something on the agenda, because some of the requests I've received were rather urgent, even though I think the topic may not be directly urgent. So understanding to manage the expectations of how quickly we can get an item to our full board for discussion, and also to continue to educate the new trustees, especially to our workflow, our processes, the strictures that we work within, and make sure that they're aware of the constant availability of staff at the vice chancellor's level or Michelle and Lars for what we might call routine requests or requests for information, so that they feel comfortable reaching out, making those communications to staff, understanding the workflow. And then as they have ideas for policies for us to consider to work through the chairs and the vice chairs of the committee to work through those issues in advance, and then work in consultation with myself and the vice chair, working with Tim so that we can tee everything up as efficiently as possible. So with that as an introduction as to the purpose of this call, I would just like to again thank you for taking the time. And before I open it up for general discussion, I'd like to ask the Chancellor to offer a few comments to help frame this discussion today.
Well, good morning, everyone. Adam, I think you've done a nice job in characterizing the intent here. It's really sort of managing expectations of keeping the board fully informed as they both learn and have some questions about any of the areas of the university, but also recognizing that we gather 6 times a year, and just looking at these charts, probably 50 or 60% of our time is already committed because of either reporting requirements, the timing of the Board of Trustees meeting relative to the timing of the political process, primarily in Sacramento, to a lesser degree in Washington, D.C. So the idea here is, how do we optimize our board meetings to meet expectations, to meet needs, and to provide the fiduciary leadership for California's state university.
Thank you, Chancellor. So I'd like to kick it up to any of the trustees on the call to please chime in with thoughts, questions, suggestions. This really is more of a conversation for all of us. Yes.
This is a very timely call in many ways. I just coincidentally had lunch with Lauren Blanchard yesterday to talk about the Educational Policy Committee and kind of some topics that we might explore. And, I asked him, what kind of topics in the past have trustees asked for, in a way of presentations or reports? And he immediately pulled out a list. And when I added it all up, it was 33 items. And I said, well, unless that policy is going to be 6 hours at each meeting, I'm not sure we can get through all 33. And I think, what we need to talk about going forward is, how can we ensure that trustees who have a right to obviously raise topics at board meetings do so in a coordinated fashion, so that we are using our time most effectively and making judgment call about what should be a full trustee discussion versus what could be a one-off, one-on-one meeting with a member of the leadership team. So I think, it'll be an ongoing conversation, but, part of what I hope to do, following up on Lily's leadership from the last couple of years, is have conversations with members of the committee and ask them to think through what's the highest priority, then what do you care most about? And as we get that feedback, then we can, I think, proffer with Tim and Lauren and the team what really is the highest and best use of our time and how we can contribute most effectively. So very helpful to have this call. And I think each of us as committee chairs have a certain responsibility to engage with members of our committee to get their perspectives and make sure that we are, not just responding to occasional one-off calls, but things that really do affect our role as fiduciaries and providing guidance and strategy and policy decision-making focus, and not getting down in the weeds. So thank you for organizing this, and I think all of us are going to be, very focused on this in the coming months and year.
Thank you, Peter. Well put. Others?
Yeah, this is John. First of all, I think this is a great problem to have a full board who has energy and enthusiasm and are very inquisitive with regard to the issues. So on one hand, I think this is a great thing. The other strength that we have is a very strong committee structure, and that seems to have evolved and worked very well. So to the degree we can rely on that for referrals and work through and then report back seems to be a strength of ours. I know as we looked at the efficiency report that was shepherded by Peter through the Finance Committee or through a special committee, it seemed to work out well, so that we could then report it to the full board. So I think options for referrals to the committees as a primary source of information gathering and sharing seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Thank you, John. Others?
Hey, Adam, I think John and Peter have offered a good tactical and sort of management tool. I do recall, Peter, when you first came in, gosh, 15 years ago, or maybe it was just 15 months or 2 years ago. A little bit when you were chairing finance and you made the pitch to our colleagues that you were going to be taking the responsibility of finance chair to do the deep dives and interrogate with Steve and his team and with me and turn every stone. So when we came to the board meeting, either both the committee and or in the plenary, you could look your colleagues in the eye and say, you know, you all have to trust me that I've done my due diligence here and done the deep dive and the heavy work. And I, on behalf of the board, am satisfied with the direction we're going, or I'm satisfied with this. And then people, you know, to the point John made, with a strong committee structure and a strong board, is we end up trusting our colleagues that they're doing the right thing. And so the combination of with members of things of interest, and then having certain members do the deep dive on behalf of everybody, I think is really the way to go forward. So there's an ebb and flow there, but there's also not everybody should be doing the deep dives on every issue. It's going to become bound up in a ball.
Yeah, fair point.
Adam, this is Becky. I agree with Peter and John that this is a wonderful way to start off your term, and I really appreciate it. You know, we were lucky a couple of years ago when we started getting new board members and had our board retreat to talk about how our board meetings could be more impactful, less of a rubber stamping kind of exercise or a pro forma exercise.
Transactional.
Yes, transactional. And each of the committee chairs, as the chancellor just said, with respect to Peter's chair of the finance, started working really closely with their staff liaison person, whoever that was, to design the agendas, to talk about ways to get things on the agenda that were important to the board. And I think I was telling Steve Relier this just yesterday, was it Steve? Because we were talking about campus planning, buildings and grounds yesterday. The staff has just done an amazing job trying to get our reports and our presentations to be, you know, succinct, sharp, useful. I mean, there's always room for improvement, and we're all about continuous improvement. But I think, you know, one of the reasons we got that board award is this is a terrific board in terms of people taking responsibility and working with staff to try to optimize our meetings a year. So this is a great step along that way, I think.
Thank you, Becky.
Jean Furstenberg, if I could make a comment. I remember vividly when Peter made that statement at the board meeting about how he had taken the deep dive and how comforting it was to sit next to him and know that someone had really done that. And I think that made a huge impression on me at that moment. But I also think the retreat was incredibly helpful to this new trustee, at least. And I just wanted to thank all of you who are planning the next retreat, because I think it really gives us an opportunity to deal with all of these issues that, you know, we're particularly interested in. And, you know, the 33 items that Lauren has that board members would like to know more about, at least we have a less formal but well-structured way to try to answer some of those things. So I just want to thank all of you for adding that to our meeting structure.
Thank you, Jean. Other trustees?
This is
Latifah, and I love this call. Thank you so much, and I would echo everything that's actually been said. And I'm really looking forward to the next retreat. And perhaps this is just I'll just put it out there, something that I know that I want to reach out to Michelle and also our new chair to, even though it's my second year, to better understand the ebbs and flows of how things spark during the year. When and how, what the calendar of labor relations happen, when in budget time, like they're thinking about the calendar as a whole over the next 12 months. And I believe when I first came on, that document exists somewhere. And there's some issues that we can't anticipate, from, again, finance and education policy to labor, to just, things that are happening this year in particular. It's an interesting year because it is an election year. So I just wonder how, one, we can support our chair in understanding sort of issues to come. Can we anticipate the larger issues? Yes. But something that I'd be interested in just sitting down now as a chair of a committee chair is understanding the trajectory of the year. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Latifah. And on that, I definitely encourage you to quickly schedule time at your availability with Melissa, of course, but anyone else in the chancellor's office. But Melissa can, I know, regularly provide you that information on the outlook for this year for sure. Other trustees? Doug? I'll call you out. I know we've had some conversations.
Just unmuting me to respond. No, it's an interesting conversation and good to develop the ideas. Obviously, some of us, have ideas to hopefully get on the agenda, and getting support from the chair, which we appreciate greatly, and look forward to doing that in the future.
Thank you, Doug.
This is Hugo. I'm taking care of my kids here, so I have a lot of mute. But I just want to say that even this conversation is really helpful in terms of welcoming, a conversation about how we function and how items get on the agenda. And I agree with the suggestions and comments so far. And I think just having this call, like others have said, is a good thing as we go forward.
Thank you, Hugo. I just don't want to leave this conversation section, and if we've given everyone a chance, I think we have Thelma and Larry. If there are any comments from either of you, just want to make sure you have a chance to offer them.
This is Larry. I guess I have a question going back to something that was mentioned a few minutes ago, and that is the idea of engaging with other members of one's committee to get their input. Are we going to do this in a kind of formal, structured way, or is it just at the next meeting, for example, in July, when this committee is discussed before the full board? At that point, for lack of a better term, instructions will be given to the other board members that if you have an issue that you want brought forward, contact your chair, and the chair then becomes the conduit to the agenda building task force, so to speak.
Thank you, Larry. I'll just offer my observations. I'll certainly report to the full board this discussion today, and I have no problem including that type of message to the full board. But I would encourage, as I said at the outset, I really view the participants on this call as the core team here of working together collaboratively. And so I want to make sure that I'm in lockstep with what your thinking is, but I also encourage each of you to, within the confines of the Bagley-Keene Act, of course, but nothing prohibits you from having conversations with your committee members, not about policy items per se, specific policy items, or whether or not to take an action on something, but rather administrative, conceptual as to how these committees will be organized and operated these next 12 to 24 months. So I guess part of my objective with this call is to continue to encourage each of you as chairs to stay active in your communications with your committee members and make sure that they know that that line of communication is a two-way street back to you, so that they feel comfortable with regular questions on administrative matters or policy matters that they'd like to discuss, so that they have that comfort zone and familiarity. And so I think all of that will then lead into a more efficient time management system. Ultimately, all of this rolls up to me being as efficient with my time on your behalf and responsive to you as possible. And so I think as we work collaboratively, we will be able to achieve that. But in the short answer, Larry, to your questions, I highly encourage you to stay in touch with your committee on somewhat of a regular basis, even if it's just a touch base and see how things are going. But thoughts and trends and other issues that might be in the news, as well as larger issues that are affecting the CSU.
Good, thanks.
Larry, Adam, this is Tim. Just 1 second here, just to make sure that the point that you just said is really crystal clear. And I'm going to turn it to Mark Muchik in a minute, who is stepping in for Andy, who's traveling today as stepping in as board secretary and general counsel. Larry, it is absolutely appropriate for a committee chair and committee members to talk to each other at any time on topics that, as you build sort of the flow of things that you'd like to see either more information on and or brought to the board for information and or action. But it is not okay to talk about the policy itself, and start saying, well, I think we ought to be doing this outcome and getting into the substance of the topic rather than just identifying the topic. And that's an important line, and I'm going to ask Mark just to articulate that. And if it would be helpful, we can put a half pager together to help guide committee chairs on the unfettered to talk to anybody and everybody about the topics we want to do, but then the constraints on when you start talking about the substance of those topics. Mark?
Yeah.
Could we get that one pager? That would be so helpful. Sorry to interrupt, but.
Yeah, we'll. This is Mark Muchnik, and yeah, we'll produce something for all of you that summarizes the obligations. As Trustee Day mentioned, obviously the Bagley-Keene Act is something we all need to be mindful of in terms of defining what a meeting constitutes, and it's appropriate for the committee chairs to be speaking with each of the members, obviously, to transfer ideas. We need to be careful in terms of having multiple members having those conversations, because that could constitute a meeting subject to the act, and similarly having the chair speak with one member and then speak with another member and then speak with another member as kind of the spokes of the wheel. That could be that could create a problem when you have multiple conversations about the same topic. But it is totally appropriate for, and I would encourage the chairs to be having the conversations with each of the members individually for the sharing of information.
Thank you, Mark and Tim, for that exclamation point on that point. So thank you. Lily has a point.
Hi, guys. The whole Bagley-Keene issue comes up with new members constantly, and even for myself, who's been on the board now over 4 years, it's sort of a slippery concept. And it just occurred to me as you were asking that question that it could be helpful. I mean, we've had some, paper on explaining spokes of the wheel and the chain and all those other metaphors, but it might be helpful almost at some point to do later in the year a role play. I just thought it would be helpful for me if we did a little role play where we actually saw somebody asking, actual questions maybe that we have, and one of our council could say, no, you can't discuss that because of this. I think it would clarify things for me and maybe for other members.
Thank you. Not a bad suggestion at all. Thank you.
Adam, this is Doug.
Yes.
Just want to, in this half-pager explanation, the one thing, is my understanding, is that it is perfectly acceptable to have conversations with fewer than a majority of the committee or fewer than a majority of the board, and at the same time be cautious not to create a serial meeting by having everybody talk to each other. However, you can, as a chair, talk to a minority of your committee or a minority of the board, as long as those two things are clear, and those people are clearly instructed not to have those conversations with other people about specific policy or things coming up. Am I right on that, Mark?
Yes, correct. And I would also add, and I probably understood, is the conversations would not be about any items that could come up for items that would be for action.
No, that's not true. I think you can have a conversation about that as long as you're withholding, you're not talking to a majority of the committee or a majority of the board, and you're not having a serial meeting. What I'm concerned about here is getting the message that you can't talk to anybody ever about something coming up. I think that's just not true. Mark?
Role playing is in order.
Yeah, Doug, I think there's a difference between talking about a specific item on the agenda where clearly you can't have a serial meeting, as opposed to more generic conversations, where you call members and ask about the future of the university and the future of California and how we're responding to the needs of the state. That's not a serial meeting. That's, I think, just doing our job.
I understand that, but the point is that, if you have a committee of 5 people, you, in fact, can talk about something coming up on the agenda with, as long as it's kept to 2 people in that conversation.
I agree. And that's my understanding as well.
Yeah. So I just want everybody to make sure that we all understand that it's not a complete restriction on ever talking to anybody about anything. I know that sometimes there's a concern that people don't understand the concept of serial meetings or majorities of committees, but I think everybody on the board, they're smart enough to get the idea of those concepts. So let's not have too many restrictions that in fact aren't within the requirements.
Thank you, Doug. Thelma, I want to throw it to you if you have any comments before we have some more discussion.
No, I just appreciate your leadership and forming this group and putting structure in place. I was just thinking, I think I agree with Lily. I think it's a good idea to have some role playing because, I'm very used to the Brown Act and have my career worked only under the Brown Act, and coming on board as a trustee, it's been a bit different with Bagley Keene. And, I have a few questions around, some of what we can or can't do. So I think it'd be a great conversation because I at times feel that very, very restricted in being able to have conversations. And I think, it'll help a bit if we do that. And maybe it would be something that could be addressed in an upcoming retreat.
Can I? Adam, this is Becky. I just wanted to add sort of an obvious footnote, which is that all of the chairs of the committees have wonderful and able vice chairs. And, it's happened to some of us that for whatever reason, the chair was not able to, take control of the meeting or continue on. So the vice chairs, it's really important to include them in the conversations, especially with staff and in planning the, agenda items and things like that. So maybe that's an obvious point, but I wanted to be sure that I put it out there.
Thank you, Becky. I would offer 2 other additional thoughts. First, just it's been mentioned a couple of times on retreat planning, just so all you on the call and of course the public who's listening, Lily and I are going to be working with Tim and his staff to develop the retreat agenda. I believe it is tentatively set for October 15th, and 16th in San Diego. So that agenda is TBD, but we are actively discussing in that agenda, so you all are aware of that. As it relates to Vice Chairs, Becky, I think that's a great point. There's only 9 of us, 9 of you on this call, plus myself. We certainly have a number more colleagues. So I really view a primary outcome of this meeting is, again, to empower your committee members to work with the chairs and the vice chairs on these ideas. And so as I get calls from other trustees who aren't on this call, one of the first things I might do, of course, logically, is to refer them to you. So I really want to make sure you have that awareness. And then lastly, again, working with legal counsel and Michelle, and I know this, don't want to overuse this, but there is always, in rare cases, the option of calling a special committee meeting, as I recall. And that takes some logistics and more staff time, so I want to be cognizant of that. But if there's something that's time sensitive where we do need to get a quorum to discuss a policy item, that's always something to have in your hip pocket. But to wrap up from my perspective, I appreciate all of your time and input. I sense that there is an agreement overall and a consensus on helping us all work as a team to manage expectations as the workflow from staff. And I should have said at the beginning, I believe all of you received the matrix that Michelle put together that lays out the annual plan for our agendas. But I appreciate this conversation because it helps give me the assurance that you're all willing and able to roll up your sleeves and help out as we have probably what will be an increased workflow with just by mere function of the fact that we have more trustees and more creative ideas that are going to be thrown out there. Chancellor, any further comments?
No, I think it was an important and timely conversation for everybody, and we will, I think, prepare in the July meeting, Adam, for your presentation to the entire board, summary of this conversation with clarity on the issues of that role playing and so forth, and then probably either create a video or at our retreat in October, do that role play instead, but maybe a video, and then so then it doesn't take up public time going through examples of what may cross the line, what doesn't cross the line, and where there's ambiguity, and trustees should call Jeff Johnson to find out, if there's a line here or not. So without inhibiting, and I think that's the overall theme here, is we don't want to inhibit. We just want to make sure that we don't have something really smart come along and then find out somebody challenges us on the way it came to the table. So it's really protecting at the end of the day, protecting our ability to advance the university.
Thank you, Chancellor. Other comments or questions before we conclude? Again, this is an information item today, so there's no action that will be taken. But any other last closing thoughts from anyone?
This was really helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Very greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you all. Not hearing anything else, then I would like to adjourn this meeting. We look forward to seeing you all at our July board meeting. And this concludes the business of the Committee of Chairs. This meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.